I'm Rajeev Goel, co-founder and CEO of PubMatic, and I'm here with my good friend, McKee, general manager of FreeWheel, and we're here today to talk about the future of the digital advertising supply chain. So welcome, Mark. Great to have you.
Oh, it's great being here. Thanks for having me.
And let's just start with, tell us a little bit about the FreeWheel business and your role in particular as general manager.
Sure. FreeWheel is an ad tech company that is focused on global solutions for buyers and sellers. It's focused primarily on the TV and CTV space for premium publishers, distributors, and the buyers.
When I think of FreeWheel, I think of really the original ad-serving platform for every marquee, almost every marquee streamer or media owner. So broadcasters, whether it's in US and Europe, I think Asia now is something that you're focused on. Tell us a little bit about who that core customer is and the geographic base of the business.
Yeah, I mean, at our foundation is on the ad serving. We think that's core to helping our customers power their businesses, especially as it gets more and more complex with the addition of programmatic or new sales channels. And so that has always been the core focus. We focused on premium, focused on the TV broadcasters of the world globally, and that's been a very important part to it. One, because it is complex, whether it's live events or just the quality of investment and sales strategies that they put forth on the publishing side. They have different needs. It's very, very different than the older days of display, and so the complexity that has grown from online web video to now streaming platforms, and now more than 400 different endpoints where a single piece of content can be consumed. It's hard. It's hard for the publishers, but certainly it's also hard for buyers as you think about that fragmentation.
Can you share a little bit about how you think about the future of digital advertising, particularly for streamers, whether it's IO-based, whether it's programmatic? Like, where is this business going over the next 12 to 24 months?
I get asked that one a lot. For the premium space, it is still largely direct IO. The relationship between buyer and seller is still much more of a personal relationship.
One-to-one relationship.
One-to-one relationship, and those conversations take place, those deals that are struck, whether it be on an upfront or more of a scatter type of relationship. We see around 30% of a publisher, or at least the premium space, about 30% actually transacting programmatically. That continues to grow as more and more impressions continue to grow as they move to streaming or new forms of distribution like fast channels. And so it's not getting any easier for our publishers as they move into more automated ways of buying and selling, but the capabilities, partnerships like yourselves, are helping to allow publishers and buyers to have a more direct connection. Because ultimately, as you think about our role, what FreeWheel is, we are here to ensure that buyers and sellers can still transact together and have the shortest, fewest hops between that connection is really the focus for us across no matter how they want to transact. So that's been a core focus for FreeWheel. It's been a core growth area for FreeWheel as well.
So we'll talk about our partnership in just a minute, but I thought that 30% metric was pretty interesting in terms of the percentage, let's say, of inventory that streamers, major broadcasters are selling via programmatic as opposed to IO, 70% IO.
Yep.
Where did you see that? Where would you have put it a year ago? Where do you think it'll be in 2 years? And then maybe to just add on to that a little bit, we had, I think, probably one of the largest streaming live sports events earlier this year with the Olympics. What did you see from a programmatic perspective around the Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, some really good topics, and it's interesting from a FreeWheel perspective. We do see, I say 30%. 30% is in the aggregate.
Right.
If you look at certain publishers, some have leaned heavier into that form of transactions, some maybe a little less, but on average, it's that kind of 30%. Of that 30%, still a majority of it is in a one-to-one relationship. So doing that in a programmatic guaranteed fashion or a private marketplace of some sort. And so that still continues to be, even as it moves to programmatic, it's really just automating the IO process, again, keeping that relationship between buyer and seller. We talked about a little bit on that growth. It has ebbs and flows. And what's interesting in the premium space, those ebbs and flows are driven oftentimes by things like live events.
Right.
We see it time and time again. Programmatic might have an uptick in the summer. And then NFL season comes along, and it's has a decrease for certain publishers as they move more to a direct I/O as they think about their live events. That same thing kind of holds true throughout the year, depending on those live events. We saw the Super Bowl on Paramount, highest viewership we've ever seen, ever. We saw the Olympics, again, 82% growth over Tokyo Olympics as it relates to viewership. And what was interesting about, I'd say, the Olympics this year, we've done some firsts. We've done some firsts with NBC and some other partners as we look to help to shift live, which is very, very hard to do programmatically, into a more programmatic way of transacting. Publishers should like it. It starts to democratize TV. So brands that would not even think they could advertise in such a tentpole like the Olympics or the Super Bowl or NFL now have that opportunity to do so. And we see, from a publisher perspective, a diversity in brands that are advertising on TV.
I think that's one of the great, let's say, benefits or upsides of programmatic in the streaming category, which is we can go from maybe 1,000, 2,000 advertisers in traditional linear TV to maybe tens of thousands, over the next 5, 10 years that can access the streaming environment. I think the political cycle is maybe one good example of that, right? Where we saw, a lot of hyper-targeting in, very specific states and counties.
It was interesting.
Yeah. Where do you think, if you think about 5, 10 years from now, would you like to hazard a guess on what will be the percentage programmatic versus I/O? Like, where do you see that going over the next decade?
I think a define direct I/O will still have a very important role, especially as you think about sponsorships and deep integrations and partnerships. I think there's going to be a big chunk that is automating that process, whether you call that programmatic or not. I think that's going to be one very, very important component.
So workflow automation.
More on the workflow. How do you automate that process, which is essentially how PG is being utilized today. And then you look at it more from a programmatic perspective, which is bringing a whole host of new biddable opportunities. So if I said, I'm going to go 50% in 3 years, and 50 to 60, I would say, in the next.
Going programmatic.
In the next 3 to 5 years, and I would say 50% of that will be automation of the I/O, and 50% of that would be programmatic.
Fully bidded programmatic. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, we'll check back in a few years and,
hope I'm
see
right.
how you're doing. Yeah. So let's turn now a little bit to our partnership. So we announced, I think it was about a year ago, an integration of Activate into FreeWheel. Activate is our buyer-focused solution, so single-layer technology where buyers can transact directly into the supply, and that demand flows through into FreeWheel customers, right, that are using the FreeWheel ad server. I think the big focus there was around interoperability, efficiency, transparency across the ecosystem. What role do you think, interoperability, efficiency, transparency, what do those play for you from your perspective for your customers?
If you just kind of take it back a little bit, the focus that we have is how do you have the fewest amount of hops between a buyer and a seller?
Right.
I think the Activate partnership and other partnerships, that plays a role in that. If you can have less of those hops, less fragmentation between where that inventory is coming from and where that buyer is coming from, the better for the ecosystem, because it is more transparent. It's transparent for both sides. It is more efficient. You're not adding costs in between. And then certainly from an interoperability perspective, a publisher needs diversity of demand. A publisher is looking to diversify how they work with partners, and we need to, at FreeWheel, ensure that happens. And so our Activate partnership is a great example of how we're living that approach. And again, when you think about it, that core principle, how do we reduce the hops? Those direct connections are what really do matter.
Yeah, you and I have been in this industry for a long time, and I think two things that are the constant. One is the advertiser, and one is the consumer, visiting media sites or interacting with a publisher. And I've always felt that if we're serving one or both of those, end entities, these principles in the transaction, then we're going to have a long-term, value proposition. And bringing those two parties closer together can only be to the benefit of everybody in the industry.
One of the things that I think is very important for FreeWheel, and it's almost our cultural kind of way of working, we have to do right by the customer. And by doing right by the customer, you are helping the ecosystem. You're working and being interoperable. And then I think it just feeds into that concept of transparency because everyone knows what's going on in the role they play.
And I want to bring in supply path optimization
Yeah.
here because I think that's also a very important trend, right, that we've seen across the industry maybe in the last 5-6 years. And it's hitting CTV in a big way. You know, what we see with Activate is a lot of potential with supply path optimization to, again, bring those buyers closer to the publisher. What are you seeing from an SPO perspective? How do you see that playing out in your own business?
I think there's a lot of work to be done there. The CTV space, right now, if you look at it from a programmatic perspective, I think a lot of the tactics that were applied, the old tactics of display, trying to apply those to CTV, are still taking shape. I think that's wrong. The complexity of CTV and the cost of the inventory, the scarcity of the inventory is not the same as it is in display.
Right.
So I think there's a lot more work to be done on that front. That said, on the supply path optimization, one part is it's just weeding it out. I think people that are bad actors, you know, I don't think there's a place for that in our ecosystem.
That's right.
And those that are investing a lot of time, energy, resource, not just on the products they build and how they work closely together, but also in how they educate the market. It's new, fairly new, you know, CTV streaming. It's changing and transferring to this streaming environment a lot faster than perhaps people are ready for from a programmatic perspective. And quite frankly, the choice that a consumer has is pretty much endless, not just from a content perspective, but how do I want to show up to watch that content?
Right.
And that's hard. And I think when you start to use tools like programmatic to monetize your inventory or to buy inventory or audiences, when you know what you're doing and when you know and trust the partner you're working with, that makes all the difference. And so when we look at supply path optimization, it's certainly the less hops, the better.
The better.
It's just fact. And it works for everybody.
And what do you see also, let's say from an innovation perspective, both as it relates to SPO, but also some of the complexity you talked about, you know, ad format innovation, for instance, or bringing in new data sets from a targeting perspective, you know, commerce data sets, right? Financial transaction data sets are starting to come into the ecosystem.
There's a lot of opportunity, again, on the creative front is a great example. We support, and from an interoperability perspective, we support many different ways in which to bring new creative formats in. It's not necessarily an area where FreeWheel is the creator of the format, but rather the supporter of that.
The enabler of it.
But it also brings with it a little bit of complexity as you think about standardization. What makes things really scale for a buyer is if the data sets are easily accessible and they have great match rates and they are easy to measure the outcome of that investment in the data or that audience. Or creative formats, if I have to have and work with 30 different partners and have 30 different formats, the scalability of how a brand will transact, it makes it much harder. Now I think AI in the creative development of certain things will play a big role in that, absolutely. I think it's still early days. But that's going to be a big factor in that. Then the formats themselves, it's why you look at the 5, 15s, 30s, 60s as the go-to format. One, because it works.
Right.
You see it. Sight, sound, and motion works. And new experiences, new formats still have to be tested and developed. But once they get that kind of understanding for do they work and can I easily execute them, I think they'll start to scale and we'll see a lot more formats coming into play. As I think about the future, live will continue to be an area of growth. It is the premium TV's ecosystem's superpower.
Totally.
We talked about, you know, the Olympics. We talked about the Super Bowl. People show up for those live events, and I think that will continue to be a very big and important superpower. The complexity of how do we make that more programmatic sits on the industry as a whole. IAB Lab is doing some great work. We're involved with it on making live programmatic. It has work to do on DSP side. It has work to do on SSP sides.
Right.
It has work to do with how FreeWheel works, and just even when we think about the spikes and unpredictability of how audiences will show up. You know, we've launched, for the Olympics, we launched a new capability called adaptive scaling. And so no matter when those spikes happen, the system is always ready and can have the capacity to expand or collapse
Fantastic.
based off of that viewership. And so way more to do.
Yeah.
And it does take the industry to make that scale, but I'm excited about that.
So Mark, I always like to close with a couple of fun questions.
I can't wait for this.
So if digital advertising didn't exist, the whole ad tech industry, what would you be doing? What would your career be?
Be a sad day, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be.
I would do one of two things. I would either be an actor, or I would be like a builder contractor.
Oh, cool. Okay, I can't say that I saw the actor coming, so
Yeah.
nice, I like it. I think you could do a great
I might
job.
not be successful, so I might be really a waiter. But
You could be doing both.
yeah,
then.
I'd be trying.
Yeah, exactly. So Mark, what is your favorite streaming show that you've seen in the last 12 months?
easy, and I'm watching season 2 right now. Shrinking on Apple. Amazing show.
Yes.
Humor, somewhere between Curb Your Enthusiasm and something dark. But it's a real topic too, which is just truly amazing.
Fantastic. Well, I think season 2 just came out. I've seen season 1, but I will watch season 2 as well.
All right.
All right, thanks, Mark.
As
Great
always,
to be with you.
Good to
Appreciate
see
it.
you, man.